Ladies and gentlemen, the Las Vegas Raiders have made some insane cuts as they officially solidify the 53-man roster for the 2023 season. We have a couple draft picks who have been shockingly released by Josh McDaniels, but we also have some sleeper undrafted free agents that may be a diamond in the rough. We're going to break this down. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Raiders content. The Raiders had some movement at defensive tackle, and Adam Schefter knew exactly what he was doing with this tweet. He made us think for a second that Chris Jones, the star defensive tackle from the Kansas City Chiefs, was heading to Las Vegas, but no. Instead, the Raiders will be trading the former 4th-round pick from LSU in the 2022 draft for the Raiders to the division rivals Kansas City Chiefs. Apparently, Josh McDaniels has already given up on the guy after a year of him being on the team and doing quite decent in preseason. And it looks like Kansas City is doing this for some insurance policy for Chris Jones. Meanwhile, the Raiders seem to like some of their other players at defensive tackle, and it seems like they decided quite quickly that it's time to move on. And Damian Williams, who did quite well for the Raiders in preseason, has been released. You had a lot of fans hoping that this guy would be running back number 2 behind Josh Jacobs, but now that Jacobs is back, seems like the Raiders no longer need Damian Williams' services, and this sort of makes sense to me. You already got Josh Jacobs, you got your pass catching back in Amir Abdullah, and Zamir White, even though it hasn't been 100% pretty, that guy is still a young guy coming out of Georgia in the 2022 draft. The Raiders have him on that rookie contract. You can get great value for this guy, and he has another year to sit behind Josh Jacobs and learn the game. And Damian Williams is more of a veteran running back, and even if he's better than Zamir White right now, he has less upside. A huge release that happened was the Raiders moving on from Sam Webb, the undrafted free agent, who ended up playing some games and starting for the Raiders down the stretch. You see him in that famous Rams-Baker Mayfield game where he got kind of smoked a couple times, if I'm going to be completely honest. Well, he has been released, and it looks like the Raiders have a crowded cornerback room, and even though this guy does have some high upside, looks like they'll be trying to maybe pluck him from the practice squad if he passes through waivers, but the Raiders are clearly going for more veteran talent, more proven talent, and rookie Jacorian Bennett at the cornerback position. And defensive end Isaac Rochelle has been released. This guy has been in and out of teams around the NFL, and his wife is quite famous for making TikToks and YouTube videos that follow his career, and they follow the release
from the Las Vegas Raiders.
So maybe Josh McDaniels did not like any of these TikToks. The Raiders also released veteran safety Jaquan Johnson. We know Marcus Epps is going to be a starter along with Trayvon Merrick. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Raiders do to provide depth at the safety position. Isaiah Pola-Mao has performed well in preseason. Perhaps the Raiders are looking to him to provide some depth. And wide receiver is insanely crowded when you have people like Devontae Adams on your team, and the Raiders actually released a former Patriot. This is a little unorthodox for the Patriot West Josh McDaniels Raiders. Philip Dorsett has been released along with Keelan Cole, who was on the team last year. And these are two veteran wide receivers, and I actually expected one of these guys to make the team. Perhaps the Raiders will try to grab Philip Dorsett, the speedster, or Keelan Cole in the practice squad. All of these roster cuts came after the ones we previously mentioned, and there's some notable stuff on here, mainly Matthew Butler, the former Tennessee Volunteer who was drafted by the Raiders in 2022 with the 5th-round pick. And it seems like the Raiders, just like with Neil Farrell Jr., are moving on from these defensive tackles after only a year. And that's pretty crazy because when you're on that rookie contract, it's pretty cheap to have that player there. They must think that it's not worth it. And you also had Cole Fotheringham released, the tight end who did really well in the first preseason game, but the Raiders must be comfortable with Jesper Horsted. They also released O.J. Howard earlier in training camp. They must really like Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper as their starters. And you also had Sincere McCormick released, who was sort of a pass-catching back by some reports in Sports Illustrated. But with Josh Jacobs there and Amir Abdullah as the pass-catching back, I guess he wasn't really needed for the Raiders. And you also had the former Fresno State Bulldog Natane Muti released by the Raiders, in addition to a lot of guards like Alex Bars, who started several games for the Raiders last year. They also moved on from undrafted free agent McClendon Curtis at guard. So the Raiders have a lot of shuffling around in the interior offensive line. They also moved on from Grasu, the backup center. And at defensive back, it was huge to see Duke Shelley released. This guy was sort of competing with Jacorian Bennett. You saw him even get some starting reps at one point, but it seems like they like the rookie and they also decided to move on from Tyler Hall at cornerback. This guy was playing some slot, and he appeared in a lot of games for the Raiders last year. And you also had Cam Sims released at wide receiver there, which is good news for Wilkerson, who balled out in preseason. And the Raiders depth chart is now up to date. These are the people on the 53-man roster right now. You got Justin Herron being the backup tackle there, and it looks like Greg Van Roten may have won himself a starting job. We know Dylan Parham is the starting guard on the left side, but with the release of Alex Bars, they must like Van Roten, and Jordan Meredith is also rising as well and going to be a part of this team. And the Raiders are keeping 6 wide receivers here. That's pretty crazy. Obviously, you have the starting 3, plus DeAndre Carter solidified himself with that role as a special teams guy. He also made some plays in preseason, and also Trey Tucker, the 3rd round pick, was going to be on this team, and then Christian Wilkerson being that guy, beating out Philip Dorsett and Keelan Cole and Cam Sims. And some of the players on this depth chart are on IR, like Britton Brown. He's going to be on IR and not available the entire year, and so you got Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, and Brandon Bolden as your running backs. And you got Malcolm Kuntz beating out Jordan Willis as an edge defender there, and Adam Butler and John Jenkins beating out the draft picks from last year at defensive tackle. And then you got Byron Young and Nesta Jade Silvera, who was selected in this past draft, but in the 7th round, he's beating out Matthew Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. And among the linebackers, Darian Butler is on IR, not going to be available for the entire year. Curtis Bolton and Amari Burney beat out all the other linebackers. Burney was selected in the draft last year, and Curtis Bolton was found as an undrafted free agent in 2022. But the big story is Amik Robertson, the only pick from the 2020 draft by the Raiders that is still on a team. A lot of them have all been cut. Obviously, the Henry Ruggs, Damon Arnett situation, but you got a lot of people like Tanner Muse, Lynn Bowden Jr., Brian Edwards also getting cut today. But Amik Robertson, it's a smaller draft class. He's the one still on a team at cornerback, beating out Duke Shelley. And you also have Brandon Faison, who's been injured. I'm not sure what's going on with him. He's still on the team along with David Long Jr. And Isaiah Polamau is making the team after being an undrafted free agent last year for the Raiders, along with Chris Smith III, the draft pick out of Georgia last year, also making the 53-man roster. And Roderick Teamer, who's been on the team for quite some time, actually, he is still going to be making this roster. We know Merrick and Epps are the starters. So overall for the defense, I think the Raiders have been able to upgrade in free agency in their depth at defensive tackle. They've also been able to find some UDFAs last year that are seriously contributing to this team still, like Isaiah Polamau and Luke Masterson. Along with Curtis Bolton, this defense should be better overall for the Raiders, especially if Chandler Jones is back healthy. You got a good rotation at edge defender. The biggest question to me is still going to be defensive tackle. Is it really addressed with Tillery and Bilal Nichols and Jenkins? Hopefully so. And with the Raiders offense, I did not see too many surprises here. Wide receiver is loaded, so you got a lot of weapons. And the question is Trey Tucker going to be utilized this year? And in terms of tight end, will it be Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper, combination of the two, or will Mayer take over after being the 2nd round pick this past season? And do the Raiders still need to address the right side of their offensive line, or is it going to be okay with Greg Van Roten and Jermaine Illuminor? It seems like the biggest surprises to me were at wide receiver in terms of Philip Dorsett. Let me know in the comments below what you thought the most shocking move was for the Raiders. My name is WiFiWillie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.